The night I first met her, the sky was bleeding rain. The storm had torn through our small town with merciless fury, leaving behind broken fences, scattered branches, and power lines hanging like ghosts in the dark. I was standing by my window, clutching a mug of lukewarm coffee when I saw her barefoot, drenched, and struggling to drag a heavy box up the driveway of the old house next door. She had just moved in a week ago, though no one had seen much of her. The lights in her house rarely came on, and when they did, they flickered like candle light behind drawn curtains. Something about her loneliness pulled at me, like the tide calls the shore. Before I knew it, I was outside in the rain, crossing the street. I didn't even have an umbrella, just a stupid instinct to help. She looked up when I called out, her face pale under the street light. "Let me help you," I said, and she hesitated, her eyes cautious but tired. I took the box from her trembling hands, carried it inside, and set it down near the couch. That's how it started. I was just a neighbor doing a favor. But that night, though I didn't know it yet, would change everything I thought I knew about kindness, pain, and love. Backhand index pointing right before we go deeper into this emotional story. Take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, because this story is all about that. Her name was. She looked like someone who had forgotten what warmth felt like. The kind of person who smiled out of politeness, but never with her eyes. Her house smelled faintly of old books and lavender. The furniture covered in white sheets as though the ghosts of a happier past still lingered there. She thanked me quietly that night, her voice barely a whisper. I could tell she wasn't used to having people around. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing small things. Her lights going out often, her mailbox overflowing, and sometimes her sitting on the porch steps staring into nothing. I'd wave, she'd nod back. It became a quiet ritual between us. Then one evening, I saw smoke rising from her backyard. I rushed over, heart pounding, only to find her kneeling beside a small fire pit, burning what looked like letters. Her eyes were wet, but steady. She didn't speak, and neither did I. I just stood there feeling the weight of her silence press against my chest. It was 2 days later when she knocked on my door. Her hands were clutching a small bag of groceries, and she asked almost apologetically if I could help her fix her leaky kitchen faucet. It was such a simple request, yet something about the way she asked made it feel like a fragile act of trust. I fixed the faucet, changed a few rusted bolts, and as I was leaving, she said softly, "You're kind, you know that." I shrugged it off, saying, "Just being a good neighbor." But the truth was, I felt something stir inside me. A strange protective warmth I couldn't explain. As weeks turned into months, our quiet exchanges grew into something deeper. Sometimes she'd leave a plate of cookies by my door with a note saying, "Thank you." Sometimes I'd mow her lawn without asking. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was two broken souls orbiting each other, afraid to collide. But one night, I found her sitting outside again, this time shivering under the faint light of the porch. I noticed her wrist, a faint bandage wrapped around it. My chest tightened. I didn't ask what happened. Instead, I sat beside her and said, "You don't have to be alone, you know." She looked at me for a long moment before whispering, "Sometimes being alone feels safer." Those words stayed with me for days. Then came the night everything changed. It was late, maybe close to midnight, when I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, stood there trembling. Her voice cracked as she said, "The lights went out again, and I can't be alone tonight." I let her in. We sat by the dim glow of candles, the storm howling outside, just like the night we first met. She stared into the flickering light and said, "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who used to stay, no matter how broken I was." Her eyes shimmered, full of something between pain and longing. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. She told me about her past, the fiancé who never made it home from a car accident, the parents who moved away, the silence that filled every corner of her life. "I thought I'd forget the sound of his voice someday," she said. "But every time I close my eyes, I still hear him saying he'll be home soon." There was a rawness in her words that cut through me. I realized that sometimes people don't need you to fix them. They just need someone to stay. As the night stretched on, her head slowly rested on my shoulder. I thought she had fallen asleep. The storm had quieted and only the soft patter of rain remained. I was about to get up to let her rest properly on the couch when she murmured, barely audible, "Stay just a little longer." Those words, gentle, trembling, almost pleading, broke something inside me. I stayed, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because in that fragile request, I heard the echo of every unspoken fear, every lonely night she had endured. From that night on, I began checking on her more often. We'd share coffee in the mornings, talk about small things, the weather, the birds, her favorite books. Sometimes she'd laugh, and I'd see glimpses of the person she might have been before the world hurt her. It felt good, like watching color slowly return to a faded photograph. But healing isn't a straight path. One morning, I knocked on her door and found it ajar. Inside, the house was quiet, the curtains drawn. I called her name, but there was no response. Panic surged through me. Then I saw her sitting on the floor, clutching a photo frame, tears streaming down her face. I knelt beside her and she whispered. I tried to be okay, but some days it still hurts too much. I held her hand, not saying anything. Words felt useless. I just stayed the same way she once asked me to. That's how we spent hours in silence, sharing the heaviness neither of us could describe. Over time, she began to open up. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since her fiancé's death. Her living room slowly filled with canvases, sunsets, waves, faces half lost in shadow. She once told me, "Every brushstroke is a promise that I'm still here." I realized that's what survival looks like. Not the absence of pain, but the courage to create beauty from it. And somehow, without meaning to, I fell in love with her. Not the kind of love that burns fast and bright, but the kind that grows quietly like ivy finding its way up a broken wall. But I never said it. I didn't want to break the fragile peace she had built for herself. One evening, she invited me for dinner. The table was set with care, candles flickering softly. She smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "You've been my anchor," she said. "I don't think I'd have made it this far without you." My throat tightened and I barely managed to whisper, "You're stronger than you think." Then she reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine, and said, "Stay a little longer tonight." I did, and that night, something shifted, not into romance, but into a quiet understanding that sometimes love doesn't need to be confessed. It just needs to be present. Days turned into seasons. We built a rhythm, shared meals, walks at dusk, in spoken comfort. I watched her rediscover life piece by piece. The pain was still there, but she learned to live alongside it. And through it all, I realized something, too. That helping her had healed something inside me I didn't even know was broken. Months later, she stood at her door, suitcase by her side. She had decided to move to the coast to start over and open a small art studio. "I think it's time," she said, her eyes glistening but calm. I helped load her car, and before she got in, she turned to me and smiled softly. "You stayed longer than anyone ever did. Thank you." I wanted to tell her everything, that I'd miss her, that she changed me, that her kindness had reshaped my heart, but I didn't. I just nodded and said, "You deserve the peace you're chasing." She drove away, and for the first time, the house next door felt truly empty. But I wasn't sad, because sometimes love is not about holding on. It's about helping someone find their wings. A few months later, I got a letter. It was from inside was a small photo, a painting of the night we first met in the rain. Beneath it, she had written, "Some people come into your life as a favor and end up staying in your heart forever." I sat there staring at the words, tears blurring the page. And I realized, maybe I didn't just help her heal. Maybe she was the reason I finally learned what love truly means. Staying even when you have every reason to leave. Backhand index pointing. Right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to comment below what part of Ara's journey moved you the most. Your support helps more stories like this reach those who need them. Sparkle special request. Comment below with "I believe in second chances" if you too think kindness can change someone's life. And remember, sometimes the smallest favor can heal the biggest wounds. All it takes is staying a little longer.